IDBM Challenge, Season 1, Episode 1. What do you do when the odds are against you? What about tackling nearly impossible challenges? Find out more in today's episode and find ways for you to become the hero of your own life.
Yeah, I already had the pleasure to talk with you about your challenges which you have been facing and also choosing in life, and how you have approached them with a lot of sisu, which you will also introduce in our upcoming minutes of talk. Yeah. And to give the students and the listeners or the watchers a certain background, would you like to give us a small intro about where you're coming from?
So a bit about my background. I guess the usual labels that we people like to use is about, our educational background. And so my background is in applied positive psychology and social psychology. And I'm currently working on a PhD that is focused on understanding how humans exceed themselves. I work a lot with trauma survivors. But most importantly, I would say that what is in the center of my life is to, be a fellow human on this planet to other humans, find ways to add some kind of warm, positive value to people's lives, and most importantly, create safe spaces, psychological safety, because we know from research, and I'm sure we all have anecdotes and experiences of how we become more alive when we are with people who kind of hold that space for us, instead of putting us in a place where we have to be all the time succeeding and we have to say the right thing every single second. It's not a normal state for a human. We learn through these little tests and tryouts, and I really see life as a sequence and series of experiences and experiments. So yeah, a traveler, researcher, runner. That's how I would define myself.
It is a very interesting background also regarding towards our course and our challenge, where people need to, focus on a really big and ambitious aim, which is very ambiguous, and they should care about themselves and also about their team to create exactly such an environment. Yeah. And I know that you are doing these multi-runs. It's multi-run, right?
Multi-run, ultra-run.
Ultra-run, yeah. The ultra-runs, sorry. So the ultra-runs, which need an impressive amount of self-courage and of courage, and to actually do that, keep running and keep being up. And we had talked earlier about the topic to dream big, and this is to me kind of a big achievement, a big dream. And you said that on your runs, which you have achieved you have done so far, you have learned a lot from other professionals out there who are also pushing their boundaries, about how to treat yourself within this dreaming big and entering these ambiguous situations. Do you want, after now I talked for 5 minutes, tell us something? Some more insights about what you have experienced and learned about.
I think some of the most important lessons and learnings have to do with rather maybe counterintuitively, not to mental toughness and pushing hard, but actually to self-kindness and to being happy with not being perfect, embracing your imperfections, and also allowing yourself to go at the pace that actually is comfortable for you at a time. So something that we do in ultra running, I don't know if everyone does this, but this is how I do my ultra runs, is that I walk most of the uphills every single time, because all the time you have to keep in mind that it's a long distance endurance endeavor, which is also like life is. Life is an ultra event, not a sprint. And very often we get caught up in the moment, and we feel like we have to do everything and we have to get it right. We have to give our most perfect contribution every single moment. But I think a more healthy way, we can also look at athletes. Are you a fit athlete or are you a healthy athlete? And if you want to be a healthy athlete, you keep in mind that tomorrow is a new day, next week is a new day. The run that you alluded to is this 2,400 kilometer 50 ultra marathons in 50 days thing across New Zealand next year, early next year. And so doing a thing like that, you have to be very patient with yourself. And I think walking up hills is a beautiful metaphor for those moments when we feel very challenged and we feel that we're running out of energy, is that when you feel a slight uphill, it is okay to slow down your pace, because it's like my friend Anna-Stina, who's an ultra runner, she says that it's wasted energy to try to fight that gravity, if you run the uphills, you're going to get your heart rate super high and it's going to take you longer to recover. So kindness in that sense, and just becoming attuned to your body, which are all things that translate to real life as well, when we are at school, with our families, with whoever it is. So it really comes down to honoring yourself. And this is something that I heard from Mark Allen, who's a 6-time Ironman world champion. So that's a person who we could imagine is super tough. But when I met him, he's sisu. So in Finland, we have this word sisu that translates as, it doesn't have a direct translation, but you could describe it as having determination and courage in the face of adversity. So it's something that happens in the moment when we feel that we've consumed our mental or physical capacities, and then we find something almost like a second wind somewhere within us. It's this like strength and power that emerges. So Mark Allen's sisu does not come from self-punishment, being hard, but it actually comes from this place of kindness. And he told me that, Emilia, it's so important to honor yourself, and that means that you set boundaries, you treat yourself with good nutrition, you don't run faster than you should in a moment, which again translates to real life as well, that sometimes we need to slow down when there's too much to do. But it also means that we select carefully the people who are around us. There's a saying that we are the sum of maybe 6 or 8 people who are in our closer inner circle. So it's very important that the people we spend most time with are people who hold a safe space for us. And that we also should aspire to be people like that to the humans who are in our close vicinity.
Yeah. I should let that rest for a second.
Yeah, that was a long answer.
But it was a very good answer, because I do believe you are very much right in many things, well, of course, otherwise I wouldn't talk to you maybe today about the topic. I want to share this point of view, because I have heard many times that especially students, the smartest ones, the elite, they were the hardest ones on themselves.
Yeah.
That ends up in depression very often, in complete stress and knockout, burnout. So, yeah, it's important to remember you are the biggest resource you have got. So treat it like gold.
It's really well.
Treat it really well. Yeah. But you also mentioned the resource of your peers around you and others around you. I really much like when you said, surround yourself with the ones who are kind to you or who make you feel good. Of course, it does not mean that there shouldn't be any challenge. Also, friction can be sometimes enriching, but it should be always in a healthy amount.
Constructive.
And not, constructive and not destructive. Yeah. And do you have some some conclusions for yourself or some insights when dealing with interpersonal communication in such tough situations, or in teamwork, or in big challenges?
I guess number one thing would be to approach the other person with curiosity. We all have a lot of resources and ideas, and we all have a lot to give. But in order for us to sometimes get those ideas out, it requires a certain environment where we feel that not every single word is being kind of checked, or validated, whether it's right or wrong. So it's very important to look for the good in the other person. I have a friend here who also is here at Aalto University, Peter Kente, and he used to play soccer. I don't know if he still plays, but I still remember when he told me this example of his old soccer coach, who said before a really important game that, hey, listen team, your number one goal here is to make the team player look good. Like that's kind of how you should approach this thing. And I argue that if we approach situations with other people more from that angle, not from what we need or what we want, but more from a place of being other focused, we naturally, as a side product, we get a space where we also flourish because we are able to build those bridges to other people. When we show other humans compassion, they reciprocate. So there is this mirroring effect that happens, and we're able to build relationships that prime us for succeeding in those goals that we set for ourselves. So that's something that I try to keep in mind, and it's also okay that we go through bad days, and when you are going through that day, it's an important thing is to communicate. There's this I often say during my speeches that which were the species that survived in evolution. They were the species that learned how to communicate with one another. So if we're having a bad day, you can say that, I'm not in my 100%, I'm having a bad day. So communication and just trying your best to kind of see things from the point of view of the other person. And if you still constantly feel that you are less than you could be in the presence of a group of people or some people, I would say that you might want to check whether you should be in that group. I do a lot of work with nonviolence. I run a campaign that is all about creating a culture of zero tolerance to abuse of any kind. And in that context, I would say that, part ways with those who diminish you. This is an important thing, and it's sometimes very hard to set boundaries. But that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my own life. That if you're not feeling well around certain people, well, maybe you should do a little check-in, whether you should be there or not. So it's good to take care of one another and ourselves.
Yeah, I think this, especially the communication part, like you have to communicate. I personally, when I arrived in Finland, it was like a tough thing for me to figure out how do you communicate within that international communication, coming from Germany where it's a very explicit communication, arriving in Finland where it's a very implicit communication, to my point of view. But it's not just Finland, it's like we have here in our studies, we have like from all the nations, people come from India, from America, from France. There are the native speakers and the non-native speakers. So there's a lot out there. And finding a common agreement or like a common understanding of how to communicate seems important to me. Also to test, hey, this is what say what you think and you see, will it be too much? Or then somebody like me, shut up for like 4 breaths before you say something, because you will just overwhelm an introvert not talking. So that might be something,
I sometimes say that because communication, we can fail at it, we can be in a bad mood, and someone, might feel that they're too much in our face and whatever it is. And I think you mentioned something about common ground and kind of just finding that, and that can even be just thinking about the humanity of the other person. Because we are still the same species living on this planet, and kind of relating to the humanness of the other person who's kind of peering to you, from those 2 eyes, and has gone through a journey. And I once heard someone say that, in the world, there isn't a human, if you hear their story, that you can't sympathize with. So in those moments when someone is being super annoying, you can even focus on that human has a story, which I don't know about, and because we tend to mirror one another. So if someone sends negative energy to you, it's very natural for kind of like to respond to it by like being a little bit defensive. But if in that moment you're able to little bit kind of ease into it, like in Aikido, when you don't resist energy, but you just kind of let it go where it's naturally flowing, in many ways, in many cases, you can actually avoid that conflict. And this doesn't mean that you have to become some floor rug who's just running away, but you kind of stand your ground, but you see where the energy is going, and many times I've actually seen that kind of a situation that could have been potentially very difficult turn into a positive encounter with someone. I mean, we all have this deep yearning to be accepted and loved. So that's the base premise of being a human. Even someone who might seem very unapproachable, they often even need it more, you know. So.
Yeah, but picking up on the individual layer of yourself, like, well, being kind to yourself, yeah, that's an aspect. You have mentioned the inner narrative, which is basically also what kind of story are you giving yourself? Do you want to share some more insights for our students so they can maybe use it even in their upcoming big challenge of this master study?
Yeah, no. It's a very, in my own personal life, it's been one of these huge discoveries to become aware of just the idea that we have an inner narrative. It's like an inner radio station that's on it's playing some kind of background music, and you can hear it when you succeed, especially when you succeed or when you fail, so to speak, if you want to use the word failure, but when we don't perform as we wished, you know, as we hoped. So if you kind of dial in a little bit in that moment, you can almost hear whose voice it is, because we pick up these ideas and tones throughout our lifetime. It's like that sticky fly paper that you like put in the ceiling and then everything gets stuck on it. So in the same way, you know, it can be a narrative from our childhood, a voice of our parents, or an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend.